officially. Meeting called to order. And
Lord, we come here today to present some issues that our citizens want us to deal with. Guide us in their requests and following their needs. Ensure our comfort and understanding of what their needs are, and help us resolve their issues as you may see fit. We ask in your name. Amen.
Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This is a workshop, which is not a regular meeting. It's a workshop that's going to discuss just things that would be able to be addressed in this forum. I'd just like to make notice that our flag is at half staff because of the passing of former President Carter. And I'd also like to make, let's see, the Vice Mayor of the City of Orange City passed. He was in his second term, and I think I did send it to Tim and Roseanne. Okay, the funeral is going to be in Orlando, and it's going to be on Friday. And I don't know if we were planning on sending a flower or something to represent the city of McAllen to another city official. So I might take that up later. Or
we'll take that up.
Thank you so much. Okay, getting down to the workshop. We only have 2 items on the agenda today for the workshop. Let me just read the requirement. The City of Lake Helen City Commission agenda is a regular schedule. This is not a regular scheduled commission meeting. This is in fact as I said, a workshop. Any persons desiring to address the commission must fill out and provide the deputy clerk with a yellow request to speak form located at the door. After being recognized by the mayor, persons are asked to come forward, speak to the podium, state their address and their name, and address all remarks to the commission as a body, and not to individual members of the commission, staff, or audience. Citizens' comments during public comment and each section of the agenda where public comments are allowed are asked to limit their discussion to 3 minutes. Large groups are asked to name a spokesperson, the period of time for comments, and this is a period of time for comments and not questions directed to the commission or staff for immediate answers. Questions directed to the City Commission will be referred to the staff and should be answered by staff within a reasonable period of time following the date of this meeting. Order and decorum will be preserved at all meetings. Personal, impertinent, or slanderous remarks are not permitted. Thank you for participating in your city government. And at that point, I'm going to turn it over to Jim and give us a...
Yes, Mayor, you said we've got 2 topics. The first is a general discussion on stormwater. It's an opportunity for Ryan with Winter and Curran, one of our new engineering firms that came on board last fall, to give a little update. I know we're 3 months out from the storm. Water is subsided other than around Lake Helen, but that doesn't mean the issue of stormwater concerns has gone away. We have a master stormwater plan that was adopted by the Commission in 2023, but of those projects in that book, none of them are having any impact involving Milton. I'm not sure some stormwater plans issues would have in there from some inches of rain in that period of time, but what Ryan is going to address is kind of like the blending of the plan and then a stormwater master plan and a facilities plan, which is kind of like a blending of the two and updating. And so I'll go ahead and turn that over to Ryan, and then after that, we've got the opportunity for folks who were impacted and those who have concerns, maybe to address some comments on stormwater.
Perfect.
Do you want any specific spot or?
You can sit up there.
Good evening, everyone.
Robert, state your name.
Yeah, sure.
Where you're from.
Ron Watson with Woodard and Kern.
Thank you.
So I guess I could just kind of start off by kind of giving you an idea of what you have on file already with your stormwater master plan. I think that always kind of helps to know kind of where you sit, what type of analysis has been done in the past. You know, kind of what was found out about that, because if you look at it from a document perspective, I understand that it can look, it's a lot of information in one. And so I can kind of give you a pretty high level foundation just to kind of bring you up to speed on like what that document consists of that we absorbed when we came on with you guys. And so, you know, a big piece of what the stormwater master plan looked at was modeling around, you know, up to a 100-year storm. So a 100-year storm at the time was a storm that was 11.5 inches within a 24-hour period. When Hurricane Milton came through, I believe it was 15 plus inches that came through during a 24-hour period. So the max calculation that it goes up to right now is a 1,000-year storm. And so a 1,000-year storm for Lake Helen right now is 18.5 inches. And so the amount of water that the city saw, and really the foundation of that master plan, what that master plan really tells you is that you have a system of closed basins. Closed basins meaning that they have water that sits in them and there's no outlet besides overland flow for them to dissipate, besides overland flow and evaporation essentially. And so the master plan and you know, some of the different figures that they show inside of it are really pointing out that the fact that if you do get a storm of that size, you will see some flooding in the community. And right now, the current state that the community's in, there's not necessarily a pathway for that water to overflow anywhere besides within the community boundaries. And so, on top of that master plan, it also highlighted some projects that the former engineering firm called out. And so those projects were, you know, specifically, they didn't really have anything to do with the flooding that we saw during Milton. And none of the projects would have been a solution to what we saw during Milton from our current evaluation, current state that we're in right now. And so the biggest project that would have had to do with water movement would have been the project around Lake Macy. Lake Macy being on kind of a separate floodplain than, you know, the kind of Lake Harlan, Lake Helen, and kind of the High Street area that's seen a lot of the flooding right now. And so that kind of is a very high level view of like where you guys are and what you have, is that they pinpointed a few projects that were involved in that. Most of them were about moving water from certain areas within the community that are seeing surface area flooding and moving them into your lake system, but they didn't have anything to do with moving the water from your lake system out of your lake system and out of the community. And so part of our study that we're going to be doing is obviously evaluating what those options look like and partnering that with a vulnerability assessment that we already have in the works for you guys to do more hydraulic modeling and figure out what your options are potentially to help. You know, and I hate to say it, that in a 1,000-year situation, unfortunately, you probably still see flooding within the community because they just don't build systems to withstand a 1,000-year storm. Or they never have. I mean, we used to build them for 50 years. 1,000 years is something that you can design something to sustain it, but you generally can't fund anything to support that type of water movement that quick. And so our main goal is to look at what we can do to help with the closed basin situation that you have within the community, but not only that, put it into a plan and also a structure that will allow us to go pursue funding to then go and tackle the projects on top of that. And so there are projects that, you know, will most likely be included in it, that were included in the master plan as, you know, potential down the road projects, but we really want to see what are your options for dealing with your closed basin issue, and then equally putting it into, a facility plan, which generally gives 3 options for each project, to then go pursue funding at a state and federal level for you guys. And so that's kind of very high level, but, I kind of want to just kind of leave it there and kind of open it up to any questions that anyone has.
I have questions.
Sure.
As I reviewed what is our master stormwater plan, which isn't, but is, I'm not quite sure of the status of that. But I noticed as I was reading that it was set up in 2 projects, short-term, mid to long-term.
Sure.
The mid to long-term was Plow Street or Plow Lake.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you remember that or not.
I do.
The terms were. That lake's still high, it's not receding quickly.
Yeah.
So at what point do you as the engineers are going to decide what do we tackle first? What's more important?
I think that that's really a question that we are going to have to work with the community on, because we're going to be able to prioritize what we think is more important for you, and a lot of that's just going to be based on water volume, and water volume collection. But it's really up to the community what we pursue, and we can only give recommendations on what we think is the most important within the community, and then it's up to working with Jim and staff and council to kind of prioritize those past that point.
In terms of,
Go ahead, I've got more questions.
just a quick one. In terms of retention ponds, and as you said, it's going to require the community to have some input on it. In other words, if you had a design that would require retention ponds in locations where there would be housing, but in the engineering perspective, that would be the best place to put water. Would that require, if that pushed that to a level of eminent domain, having to use the location of a house in order to facilitate the convenience or the safety of the whole community? How would that work?
I mean, I would say that nothing's off the table when we look at what your options are, and that's part of the facility plan. The beauty of it is that we have to give 3 options for each project that we highlight in the facility plan. And so one of them can be no option, that we do nothing on it. One of them can be situations where eminent domain may be involved, because that is another option that you have to pick, and then one of them may be an option where eminent domain isn't involved. And so we'll rank them for you based off of what we think are the most feasible, the most fundable. But at the end of the day, it's up to the community to decide which project they want to go with. And so we can only advise you on that. But, when you're looking at a facility plan, and the idea behind it is that we have to look at alternative solutions for each project that we have. And we can only advise you as far as, which solution we think is your best option from an engineering perspective.
From the state and federal level, is there any direction or support coming from them, or are we on our own for the most part?
In regards to guidance or funding?
And funding of the resources, because our community and our budget may not be able to sustain some of the things that might be on that list. So
Correct.
I assume that the next thing would be to go into the federal government or to the state.
Correct, yeah. So we're going to be tapping all the resources that we can possibly. So countywide, statewide, and federally for you. Because, right now, it's a big undertaking, the type of projects that you even have on your current stormwater master plan right now. And so, the concept of what we're putting together is that we're going to be putting together a document that will provide you the ability to go pursue funding, and will provide us the ability to go pursue it on your behalf for you. Because planning documents are great, but if we can't get them shovel-ready projects, it's just another document collected that's on the shelf. So our goal is to kind of get it across the finish line for you.
When you're talking about the funding, I was in a meeting today,
Yeah.
and quite a long meeting, like 100 speakers plus, and a lot of our cities nearby were asking the delegation for federal funding or state funding.
Yeah.
And city came up with, they could match 50%.
Sure.
I don't see where Lake County can match 50%, like if we needed pumps or water lifts or whatever.
Yeah.
So is there any funding out there that you think you can get us, that we don't have to do a 50% match? Because every one of them that spoke could meet the 50% match, which was a lot of money.
Sure. Yeah, so you're going to score higher if you have a match, is the way that most funding programs work. It's not necessarily a requirement by any means, but it will help you score higher if you do have some form of a match that you have. It doesn't always have to be 50%. I don't know the program they were referencing specifically, but if you look at other state funding programs through like FDEP, which would be like a water quality grant, for instance, water quality grant, you can generally get away with a smaller match, and then it's going to be also community specific as well, and so they're going to look at it from what your community has and what your community's ability to provide, funding for these projects is, and so you're not just ranked on what your match is, you're ranked on a whole list of criteria outside of that, including your project.
What do we get out of the ranking? I'm kind of
Funding.
confused on that.
Yeah,
Funding.
so there's a bucket of
How
money.
much funding?
Correct, yeah, so there's a bucket of money that's in each one of these grant pools through the state. And so you have the ability to go and pursue a portion of that grant pool, obviously. Some years they go completely, to where they're not tapped to the full 100%. Other years, there's more applicants than there is money to give out. And so the scoring criteria is set up so that when you are in a situation where there's more applicants than money to give out, they're going to rank each project that applies for that grant at that point. And so you're going to be scored based off of what your project type is, your benefit for the type of grant that you're applying for, or the criteria behind that grant. And then sometimes your match is going to come into play if you end up having a similar score to that. So I don't want it's not going to diminish us from applying for these grants if you don't have a match. Let me put it that way.
Mayor, just go back to your question on eminent domain. I mean, the state laws made it much more difficult, probably protecting property rights. So I think it comes up to a supermajority. So unless something is sitting right in the very middle, and it's like that is the most logical solution, you probably would want to work around using eminent domain, because that itself would tie up the process, and it would add significantly to the cost, because then you've got to acquire a piece of property and go through that process. And the laws on the right of the property owner, which it should be, it's their property. So ideally, we could do, or ideally, what the facilities language shows that you could hopefully do this without the need of having to acquire property unless it was vacant and open property. That may be a little more reasonable for a seller to accommodate.
And that supermajority, I mean, every one of the commissioners would all have to vote for yes.
I think eminent domain.
Makes sense.
Or
Right.
four to one vote.
Or?
When you do a supermajority. I know you mentioned about the appropriations. Senator Meeks was the biggest one that was talking about that. He sits on the Ways and Means Committee, Appropriations Committee. So he knows how all that funding and everything from the state works. But what the state also does is when they get their fundings in, each of the departments gets a little bit of a piece of the pie, because they put theirs into the state also to get their cut before it comes to the citizens. So DEP will get a big chunk, and that'll get split up between the St. John's Water and all the other water districts. And the St. John's will have their cut, and they can offer it for different programs that affect them. DOT will receive a certain amount, and they'll offer grants that help with with state highways and roads and stuff like that to help prevent flooding and things like that. So that's why Kearns, they'll take and look around and find out where all these funding parts are and where they come up at to see, what's available out there. And each one of them has different, some of them, depending on what it is and what it affects, like if it increases jobs or increases housing or something like that, they'll give a higher amount of forgiveness than one that, you know, doesn't affect too much of that. So they'll look into all that and get all that for us and see what we're going to do. As far as our local area, I think our master plan needs to be redone because it was based off of, to me, even though I saw it, it was based off of everything prior to the storms of 2022. It was based off the storms of 2022 because every single one of those issues that are addressed in the master plan were flooded areas from 2022. So, but yeah, our master plan needs to be redone, brought up to date, because there was a lot more issues that weren't covered in that plan, and that's why the amendment was done to it to cover some of the other issues. So it needs to be brought up to date to include a lot of them, like North High Street, Lake Pearl area, utilization of the Deep Creek Swamp Recharge, and different things like that to help put our our stormwater into. One of the things that a lot of people, and one person mentioned it today at that meeting, the people who deal with earth science and everything else, they've been looking at the effects of the weather changes and the polar cap shrinkages and glacier shrinkages and the water levels coming up, and everybody's worried about the coastal lines. Well, what they don't realize is these storms showed us how much those melting ice caps affect our water table, because our water table is higher than what it used to be because of all that flooding, all that melting of the ice and everything. So the water levels coming up, if the ocean's coming up, our water levels are coming, our groundwater levels are coming up. So when you have more storms and rains because of the amount of water that's being evaporated into the air, you're going to have more saturated ground. And that's what we went through with all of the storms, adding to the higher water tables and everything. And it's not going to get better for a period of time because we're going through that fluctuation of the Earth cycle. And we're going to have more and more flooding as it goes on. Because Florida is nothing but a swamp low area. We don't have the high areas like the other states have for the water to run off into different areas. We're flat. We're a swamp. And more people's moving to Florida because of the weather and everything. We don't have really a place to put them without draining the swamps, which is going to cause flooding in the communities. And that's the issues that we're going to be going through.
I mean, you mentioned something that with the melting of the polar caps is that the fresh water that's coming off of the melt of the caps mixes with the desalinization of the seawater, and the oceans become less salty. And once the oceans become less salty, the climate changes will also require, or not require, but it will provide even more storms, because now you have you don't have the same level of heat. And, I mean, you have more salt, less salt, more fresh water, and now that becomes a whole other cycle. I mean, I don't even go into what we call climate change, but it is something that we are now becoming face to face with, I believe.
I think I saw something that Volusia County is in the top 7 for flooding.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're higher than that now.
I mean, we may be number 1, but they have 7 counties listed.
I don't think we're number 1. I think we're close to number 3.
We're three. So, you took out, or you filled out the paperwork with Transform 386.
Yeah, we did.
For $200,000.
Sure.
And that was to review our master stormwater plan that we have currently.
It's to build off, it's to create a stormwater facility plan.
And you're thinking that we need to go ahead and just redo the whole thing or build off of it?
We need to build off of
Okay, I just want to make sure, because we spent $100,888 for the thing that needs to be built off of now, and now we put in for $200,000 to go ahead and revamp. It's a lot of money.
The reality also is that that plan that was written in 2023 became obsolete this year with the storm that we got. Everything that we had in that plan, nothing that was in that plan accommodated a 1,000-year plan. So everything that was in that 2023 plan that did not get implemented, that too has already been obsoleted. So we're spending money that we, in some ways, we don't have an option. And we can, as a commission, that gives us cause to pause to realize that the things that we do as a commission, not just for the immediate, it also affects the future. And that's in terms of looking at what we do. It is not a today kind of an issue. It is today and tomorrow. And that gives us a little, I'll say for me, incentive that we gotta do a lot more than what we're doing. It may not be that we can afford to do more. That's the other problem. If I mean, there might be requirements that we need to do, but we may not be able to afford it. And that's another scary part.
That's my concern.
Yeah.
Because our stormwater fees right now generate just under $130,000 a year.
I'm sorry.
The stormwater fees will generate at the current level under $130,000 a year. So when you take that and roll that into multi-million-dollar projects, you're not getting what we
You
want.
sure?
And not all of that's available for projects. Some of that takes care of other mandates and issues that are done through there. So there's a good portion of that money. And right now, you only have $130,000 to even start the year out.
Where we sit today as whomever travels the city, be it Public Works, the staff, which streets are the worst that where we sit that are in critical need for our citizens to be taken care of?
Oh, every dirt road. Every dirt road's got problems. We can't keep up with the roads with the rain going on. Even with millings, they need to be rebuilt right now and rolled, and that's only a temporary solution. You know, obviously paving is the only solution you got to really make anything happen, but you've got stormwater coming off of that too when you do that, so you have to figure that in. But Tangerine's one of the worst ones as far as length of road, bad, because as soon as you get it smooth, they fly down there and they tear it up, and then the rain hits, you got trees, the trees beat right there in certain areas as the cars go, and you have constant, just one area that constantly be a hole there. You can keep filling it, you know? And then you got the flooded roads we've never had, so we're gonna have to see what happens there. I mean, I know that Tangerine on that side over there is gone, the bottom base road and everything, but we can't even attempt to do anything with it until after, then they're gonna have to engineer and see what we have to do that. And you still have nowhere to put the water when it comes again. Over here on this side, same thing. You got Harlan, you got all that. Those are your problem on the paved roads, but all your dirt roads, I mean, we all have problem everywhere. They all flood off people's yards and everything because that's just the way it was built. We are an old town, we don't have any stormwater. The only stormwater we have in the whole town basically is the woods that has any kind of system at all. We have a couple little areas, but nothing, and I think most of the ones we have are on county roads. So.
That creates another situation in that all dirt roads mean that water will absorb into the ground. Every time you pave something, the water's got to go someplace else.
Yeah, you're gonna have that, yeah, and even with the dirt roads, even when you put a topical coat over them, unless you left them sand, even sand, they're still gonna sit there and lay water on them, it's gonna go down maybe a little quicker. You know, the good thing is it goes off the road. The one place the water can go is off the road into the yards and a little bit of swales we have and, places like that. So, I mean, all your dirt roads, every road we have right now is completely in need of repair. repair them, I'll repair Tangerine. We've already done it, it's already back. And we haven't even gotten the rain weather yet. When that comes, we're gonna be even, really bad off.
A couple of people at the meeting hit it right on the head as why we're having so many flooding issues besides the changes in our weather patterns and everything. The number of people that's moving to Florida 20 years ago, we didn't have flooding problems. The water had places to go to and everything. In the last 20 years, millions of new houses and developments have been installed that have filled in all those areas where the stormwater used to go to. So where is it going to go? It's going to go into those lower streets that were built before the new construction standards came out. So it's a never ending, I would say it's 75% man-made problem and 25% nature. I know on my street, I can use that one as an example. I live on a dirt road, and I hate it when the city comes in and to level it because it messes it up. Back years ago, I've got a garden area. The reason why I put the garden area right there where it's at on my street was because that area used to get 18 inches of water every hurricane season. For the last 10 years, it might have gotten quarter inch of water because in that time frame, the city found out about this new material called crushed concrete that they put on, and then they realized crushed concrete during the summer was making too much dust, so they put millings over the top of that. Well, once all those new road things, the slope of the road moved from pointing towards my garden, where all the water used to go towards the other way, so it goes through the people's yards, and that's why you have a lot of washout and dirt over on Elvira, because instead of the rain coming off of the slope and going down into my garden area, it's now coming off of the slope and going down underneath my parents' house and going out into the grass and going down towards Lake Macy. And going down, more water's going down because of the millings, and more water's going down to Massachusetts. It keeps on cutting out the edge of the soil there, and all that sand from the yards and from the road is going down on Elvira and builds up down there. So it's, mankind can do wonders in causing problems when they try to fix things too.
Well, building off of something that you said, one thing I'd like to see that we maybe could see if it would be helpful is vegetative control. I don't know if that's something that's within your purview or is being considered for stormwater master plan, but I have met with several experts over the last year or so on vegetative control, and I'm interested to see if you all have ideas on that and how it can help with stormwater.
Vegetative control in regards to like vegetative maintenance or
No,
vegetative implementation?
implementation in order to control the stormwater that we're seeing.
Okay. I'm sure it's something that we can look at for you.
So you've got two parts. One's vulnerability, and I forget.
Yeah, so the vulnerability assessment is done through the Resilient Florida program. It's a program that they opened up to look at vulnerable communities. It was originally opened up to coastal communities for us to get thinking around planning toward where's your community vulnerable and how do we need to be resilient in planning for the future of these communities, specifically around water.
So that would be step one.
That's step one that was already in motion prior to the hurricanes for you.
Okay.
Now, step two of that is building in a stormwater facility plan, which is going to be essentially a build off of your master plan. But the whole thing with planning, any time that you look at planning, it's not necessarily about putting together a document that says here's our plan going forward. But our firm looks at it a little bit differently. It says, here's our plan, but here's also a working document that we can now utilize to go chase funding for. Because when you put together a plan, you know, for instance, a master plan, the current state of it limits our ability to go chase funding for those projects. And so when we put it together into a stormwater facility plan, we open the door up to SRF funding, we open the door up to a lot of the state funding, state grant funding. And so our whole goal is to get past the planning phase and move it into design and construction on these projects. And so, yeah, sorry. I can see you have questions. So.
Yeah, because based on the fact that we stated that we already have the master plan.
Sure.
Which puts us in a better position for funding.
It puts you in the plan that we're developing for you right now is a plan that takes into consideration a funding application used toward it, as well as also building off of your master plan that you already have. So your master plan is, I guess the best way to put it is that your master plan wasn't for nothing, it's just an adaptation of your master plan. It's also putting into consideration the criteria and structure that it needs to be in to chase all funding options available.
Yeah, and that's what I was, I guess the path I was going down is based on each city that I've talked to, be it a council person or a city manager or an administrator, those that already had their master plan was much better, they were in a much better position to go ahead and start applying for the funds.
Yeah.
So could we not use the one that we've got, even though we're gonna build off it, so we can start looking for funding at the same time?
So we will.
Okay.
We will. So some of the projects on there we'll prioritize and we'll go back in and apply through Transform 386 for potentially some of those projects to get them moved through design and then into construction. You know, but as far as if you look at it from two separate issues, you know, you look at it from the flooding that the community saw during Lake Helen, in that master plan, the projects that they had highlighted, none of them would have been a solution for the flooding that we saw in the areas that we saw at that time, if that makes sense. And so
I think that's
we have to reevaluate to see what our options are in those vulnerable areas to hopefully set ourselves up to be in a better spot if that happens again.
So how long do you think that it will take you to get the vulnerability portion taken care
The vulnerability assessment and the master plan and the facility plan are going to run in conjunction with each other, and that's because of the modeling required for the vulnerability assessment is going to be implemented on the facility plan at the same time. So our goal with the vulnerability assessment traditionally is to get them back into implementation by Q4 of the same year, 2025, because the Resilient Florida program opens back up and we can apply for funding through that program potentially based off of what we find in that vulnerability assessment.
of? And is that date, I'm sorry?
So it's in Q4 of 2025.
Oh,
Traditionally.
fourth quarter.
Yeah.
So that'll be at the end of 2025, so we're gonna be going through another hurricane cycle prior to, correct?
Before the plans are done. So, you know, when we started on it, which was, you know, end of November, you know, we had an 8-month timeline on that. And so our plan is to hopefully have both done within that 8-month timeline, which will open us back up hopefully to the funding sources that we need to tap to move these projects forward.
26.
Correct.
5 or 6 years ago, the focus was on water. Every meeting I went to was about the lack of water and what were we going to do to try to conserve or to save water. So within, I say 5 or 6 years, it might be less than that or more, but the whole ecosphere has changed from saving water to getting rid of water. So how nimble are our plans if we are in 5 years have gone from trying to save water to try to now move water? I mean, that might be a question that you may not be able to, but that was something that, excuse me, that was something that, that I had to face while we were in this commission.
Well, the one thing I'll say to that is that it's not always about saving water as much as it is about moving water sometimes. You know, and so saving water and moving water are two different things. You know, when we move water in a community outside of the community, it doesn't mean that it doesn't have a similar impact as far as a saving water perspective goes, or recharging enough, or, you know, going back into the water table. But there's stormwater and the movement of water versus the saving of water are kind of two different topics, I would say.
Well,
so I still say that's very important, you know, recharge it before
the reason I say saving water is because our lakes was drying up at one point.
Yeah.
So nobody was worrying about where the water's going. We were asking, literally begging for it to come.
Yeah.
So sometimes you get what you want, or you get what you ask for. And so that was on everybody's mind. I mean, I can remember going to some meetings where they were even talking about building cauldrons so that the water that would come from the hurricanes would be able to be saved so that it could be tapped at another point in time. That was a lot of energy that was put onto that.
Yeah. You know, that's a lot of what you guys saw during this hurricane season, you know, was a hurricane that hit with a 1,000-year storm, or close to a 1,000-year storm, that, you know, maybe hit it at one of the worst times that it could hit, as far as, you know, when you're dealing with closed basins, the evaporation needed to get the water to leave the area, essentially. And so, you know, you may still have years of drought, you may have years of excess rain, but the whole goal is just to plan for, you know, when we are in situations where things build up on us.
Okay, so to me, the million-dollar question is, when can we start moving some of this water for our citizens? I get that all the roads are a mess. Obviously, we get more rain, well, paved roads are going to crumble even more so. You may have people falling into sinkholes. So, just your best guess, when do you think that we might start working on the roadways? Or we can't until we get the stormwater plan because we need the money to do so?
Right now, we need a stormwater plan, get the money to do so. From a long term, or I guess you'd say larger project.
Okay, so what I suggest is we just build an arc post, because if we're going into 26, you know, I mean, we still have another season to go through, and for the next 9 years, based on what meteorologists are telling us, the next 9 years is going to be very wet for us. So we're looking at problems, if that's true. Not that I trust weatherman on any channel in Florida, but I think we need to build an arc.
And if state on the first level and the federal on the second level, they'll also make a funding commitment to infrastructure. That will impede us because there's only so much we can do at 130,000 a year.
I get it, but we don't have the money. And how are you going to go and ask our residents? I was at an HOA meeting last night, and gosh, I thought that some of our meetings got really nasty. I mean, people were screaming at each other, they were angry with the owners, they were telling people to shut up. You were there, Betty, it was pretty bad, because a lot went up to $40, and because of us now being taxed from the non-ad valorem more dollars, these people can't afford it. I mean, I thought they were gonna start throwing cakes at each other. It was crazy. I can't see me asking them to come up with any money.
I have some questions.
And yeah,
Okay, awesome. Okay, so I know that we are waiting to have the completed stormwater master plan. Is there any possibility of phasing, like project priority? I mean, what's done now, can we start prioritizing some of those projects? It just seems to wait until the beginning of 2026 feels very far away for the folks that are still dealing with this every day.
I definitely understand that. I guess the best short-term answer to that is, or the best question would be what our end goal is, you know, and so based off of the priority projects that we know that are out there right now, that are big, you know, within your master plan that you currently have, there are some that I think should remain a priority for us. The Macy Lake project would probably sit up there on that list. So chasing money for that project specifically, we can go do. The other projects that are in relation to some of the flooding that you saw over the, you know, Lake Helen, Lake Harlan area down High Street, those projects haven't been developed yet. And
Right.
so for us to chase money for those projects, we aren't ready to do that.
No, I understand.
And so I know it's not the answer that you want to hear, a good answer, but we're not ready to go pursue funding for those projects. And until we are, we can't go and just get, you know, we can't go tap our resources needed to get dollars in, you know, from a long-term project perspective.
Right. If we have an idea that Macy is still going to remain a priority, and that's something that we're able to provide or to go after grants and funding for at this time, is that something that we could give consensus in order to work toward now? Or is that not something we can do in conjunction with what we're doing currently?
I guess that, you know, from our perspective, so that they are ready to go pursue funding for those projects. The funding is not ready for us to pursue it yet. And so there's timelines based on every funding program. So
Okay.
when Jim and I met with Volusia County about the Transform 3 and 6 program, they asked us to potentially go after more dollars with them. Now, it's not open yet for us to pursue that yet, though, until they give us the go-ahead that it is, and then the second round of funding is back open. We can't tap that resource yet.
And then it's also taking one of those projects and getting it, maybe some simple term shovel ready. So it's not a concept, you're
Right.
actually, so when you're getting funding,
Absolutely.
you're ready to bid in terms of.
Right, we're not ready for certain ones, I understand that. I'm like a hungry dog waiting at the gate for the food to come out. Let's get this project
You throw on top of
going.
that,
It stands even.
the roads that we have impacted. And, you know, while we're going through the process with Woodard and Curran and FEMA on them, if we may get either mitigation or, you know, apply or they get qualified for some FEMA in reference to like Church in Pennsylvania, Rick, you know, the areas where we were at. So I mean, so again, some of those are critical and priority, so some of that stormwater funding is going to be potentially needed, because again, even with FEMA, nobody's handing you a check, you do the project and then you get reimbursed. So there's still an issue where we've got to come up.
Right, okay. I remember in a meeting, we had gone to in Deltona, Jim. I can't think of which meeting that was now, I have 4 minutes. But there were stormwater bonds mentioned. Is that one of the funding sources that we are considering? Because I know, excuse me, Clint with the emergency services for Volusia County had mentioned that and said that there were some dollars available. We just needed to submit our projects.
Yeah, so I mean, we're going to look at every potential
Okay.
solution that's out there
Okay.
from the perspective. And
Yeah.
that means, yeah, that doesn't just mean grants, that means, you know, debt options. We're going to look at the full gambit of what we have so that we can look at our options to fund all the projects that we have highlighted on the priority list. So it's going to be, I guess the best way to put it is that there's not a singular source that's going to fund all the projects that you guys are going to have to accomplish within the community. We're going to have to tap
It's all being
every
considered.
resource possible.
Great. And, what was the question? I remember, at the beginning of the conversation, we had talked about how we're closed basin and, we would potentially be considering, ways to get the water out of the closed basin. Is that part of the vulnerability / facility study that we're doing, or is that a longer term?
No, it's gonna be bridged in there. We just haven't gotten to the point where I can even say that that's an option yet.
Okay.
Now, everything is an option, I guess you could say. The problem is it a realistic option for us to accomplish? We haven't gotten to the point where I can say yes or no on that. And I can't say yes or no on what our options are, where we move the water to either.
Okay.
You know, so we're too premature in our study to give you a informative answer on that.
Okay, so the options include properties we already own, eminent domain, getting it out of the city, evaporation, accelerated evaporation pumps.
Sure,
Possibly.
yeah,
Okay.
everything under the sun will take a look at.
Okay, great. And, I think those are all my questions for now. Thank you.
Just as a reference on your question about the bond, our stormwater assessment started as a vote from the citizens to do a bond to fix some stormwater issues, and then to pay it back. The assessment was started, and it was supposed to be, I believe, something like $20 a year for 25 years, and then it was supposed to go away, but it ended up staying, and now it is what it is. So that's where the bond issue started with that one. But get a bond issue, got to pay it back one way or another.
Okay, I've just got to ask the question. You keep telling us there's options. There's things that you're going to be obviously having to study. When we first met, I believe there was a female partner of yours.
Yeah, she's our project manager.
I asked her about the amount of time that she thought it would take, and she said about 8 months.
Correct.
So now that's changed. Can you tell me what you guys have worked on from the time that we said, okay, you've got the contract? Kind of give us a mini report of anything that's been worked on thus far?
Yeah, I'm sorry if I misspoke around the timeline. That timeline hasn't changed as far as the business goes. So what I was referencing before was more of like our timelines and how we approach vulnerability assessments, and the reason why being that the funding opens back up toward Q4 of the next year. But our timeline as far as when she spoke and referenced 8 months, that hasn't changed.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's still our goal.
Okay. So what have you worked on?
So as of right now, we've had our engineers going out and doing field surveys to do assessments on existing assets that you have within the community. And I
Don't
know
forget
that,
the lead and copper pipe.
Yeah.
That we had, it was federal mandate by October, that was the first thing they took on, $200,000, and that will be on the agenda on Thursday.
but in regards to the stormwater piece, since we took the project on, which would have been end of November, I believe is when we started, it's in the last 30, 45 days. Our team has been out in the field doing inventories, as well as looking at the existing data of the current stormwater plan. So our next phase traditionally is we're going to move into hydraulic modeling next.
And speaking of lead and copper pipes, you're aware that mandate has come down that in 1927, we've got to get rid of all of our lead piping. 27. Oh, did I say 19?
Oh, what?
I'd like to go back to the, have my own cow and all that good stuff. 2027, I apologize.
Yeah, no, we're fully aware. So I can talk more about that on Thursday when we come up to discuss it, but there's very little in this community that we've found, so. And in most of the communities in Florida, we found very little. We know it's a federal mandate, for specific reasons around some communities, northeast, areas like that, they're everywhere, but in Florida, luckily, we've not found a ton.
Anything else? Anyone?
That's everyone from the
That's it on
the delegation today. And this is not the first time I've heard about our water having PFAS and the remediation for that. We know we have water issues besides stormwater. How can we talk about the expense of stormwater and digging up our roads and all of that stuff for replacement. How can we coordinate possibly both programs of fixing our stormwater and our asbestos water pipes and lead and all of these things, our drinking water and stormwater? Can we do that?
It's possible, yes. PFAS and kind of asbestos are two somewhat different topics.
Well,
of
they're
conversation.
relating. I think the U.S. studies that have been, they've been presented to the county, and then they were presented to the delegation today. They are, and they have connected some of the asbestos pipe with the study. I don't know what other sources we may have that come from, so that's what they're linking that to.
Yeah, so traditionally when like a water project and a stormwater project would be linked like that, we'd be looking at linkage between conveyance piping. And so that means moving water from, one area of a road and being able to bridge that with some type of funding in regards to the water that we're also going in and fixing at the same time. So
Is that something we can look at though?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, just to be cost effective?
Absolutely,
Okay.
yeah. And it is something that our funding team always looks at is, what the best options are, so.
Okay.
Yeah, we were actually told today that Deltona signed a contract last night with an attorney to sue due to, I guess, the water situation over there. And then actually the presenter today brought up Lake County because in the study from U of F, they discovered there was 2.7 miles of piping with asphalt in it.
That's-
Now, Roger says there might be something that washes it out, I don't know. But
There's a chemical that they put in the water to seal the pipes to keep contaminants from coming off the pipes into the water.
then was the PFAS. That's within a 10-mile radius of Deltona. We are within that 10-mile radius of Deltona. So I'm wondering, do we actually check for PFAS, or who does the water sampling for us?
US Water.
Okay, do you know if they check?
No, I do not know. It's already gotten DEP. I don't know what they do as far as testing wise.
Do they give us a report that we can look at?
Yes, you get a report all the time.
Okay.
Anything they test, you can get a report on. I believe last year they did was the big year of testing, so I don't know what's on that report yet.
Okay. Because if there is going to be a lawsuit, this commission might consider being a part of that lawsuit to get some funding to help us, since we're in that situation. But also, I think that we need to at least have a heads up prior to, and we do have to have the data to present, to get involved with all of it. But it was discovered here in Lake County. So.
Yeah, PFAS is definitely something that's coming down the pipeline from a federal mandate perspective, so, it's something that, we can absolutely work with Jim to, figure out next steps for it. But traditionally, we start with testing, so you need to make sure that you have it, and then how much you have it, if you have it.
Because that's kind of scary. I'm not big on toxins.
I guess we've reached, any more? Are there any more?
I just got a question. When we had the meeting at Ivy Hawn, and we had the master plan, and we paid the professionals to tell us how much we need to start charging for taxes, for stormwater, we didn't follow that plan, did we?
Yes.
We did? So we're,
Yes. The suggested plan, the rate this year, I brought that up during our budgeting, and we did go ahead and in line.
so next year we should be at the maximum, and then and they're on 3% more. This, like
Yes.
150 or something?
I was trying to pull it up, but it's not loading in here.
Yeah, there was,
Okay, so we're following, okay.
there were 5 different scenarios that we could choose from. We chose one of them, and I forget which one it was we chose.
Yeah,
As long as I'm on the commission, I'll continue to bring that forward if I need to, but we can't bind future commissions to that plan. It's just that's what we were thinking at that time, that's what our plan would be. So hopefully we'll continue.
and have we received that grant for the 200,000 to pay for these studies? I see it in our bills that we paid, we're paying quite a bit of money to them. Are we doing
That's
that
for
grant
the-
money?
That's for the copper and lead pipes. They'll be addressing that on Thursday.
We got the 200,000 though in December, what was it? Or was it?
Yeah.
That was November.
That,
The 200,000 we did receive.
that was towards the lead pipes and the copper project. We should transform 386. We got approved, but there's no check being handled. The county is actually handling that. So it's not like they're handing us a check for $200,000. It's going to be working with them in the planning phase. So it's not like they just hand us a check and say, go off and do your job.
So this, we're just taking out our budget now to pay them for the monthly bills?
Is there anyone else? Anyone else? Okay, we just shift gears and go into build a moratorium. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, this is on here for discussion of the commission. It was discussed previous meetings, and we know the county's going through that process. They did a step back, and I know that it's coming forward again. So just to ensure that you all have been able to have that discussion. If you were to go forward with any kind of moratorium, you couldn't make a decision tonight because that requires then ordinances, public advertising, hearings that has to take place because you're talking about people's property rights. And so you have to let them know ahead of time that you're impacting their rights. So this would be more of a concept and discussion to see whether or not you wanted to have your city attorney initiate that process.
So when you send property rights, in other words, if there's a development that's already in plan and we slap a moratorium in it without discussing it with them or to discuss it with the public, then we would be in somewhat of
A moratorium would be today going forward. Anybody who's in your pipeline is not impacted
Doesn't-
by the
okay.
changes. So like the project Summit in Maine, there's nothing you could do to stop that that's already in the pipeline. So you're talking about new applications coming in for development, predominant applications that come in Lake Elm for single-family houses.
okay.
So it's my understanding if there's already a permit,
Yeah.
then they're still in the pipeline.
Exactly.
If they're already in negotiations, they don't even have to have a permit, but if they're already in negotiations to have it,
Oh, really?
yeah. Because I think Edgewater passed one on a moratorium on new residential developments, but it doesn't count any of them that were already in the pipeline prior to last night
So what they,
or last week.
yeah, they passed that last month, and the moratorium is for a year.
Yes, for residential, not for commercial.
And then typically what the purpose is that moratorium isn't just to stop development, it's for you then to update codes and regulations for what it is you're trying to implement. So let's say, for example, you're going from a 100-year storm to one doing a 500-year storm. So you can't just stop it and not do something. You've actually got to take some steps to update codes and regulations and whatever, so that there's a goal of what you're getting to in terms of that process.
wouldn't be the only reason I would support a moratorium on construction would be to update our codes, which are horrendously filled with gray areas that are left to interpretation.
So moratorium would be to address what? If there are building codes that are in place that the weather-related moratorium may affect, then a building code would then have to be modified and changed to accommodate?
Well, not so much the building code. We fall under the Florida building code.
Yeah.
So they do their modifications. We're talking about like the county and the communities where there's a perception, that growth has caused flooding. And Roger, I think, kind of expressed that pretty well. I mean, as we've grown, more areas that absorb water are taken over, but the irony is the new construction actually has to have its own retention. It's not what the Woods has their retention ponds in terms of their. So the problems you got in Lake Helen aren't because of new construction, they're because of the lack of a stormwater system based on the history of the development in the community. So, that's kind of like, you gotta get to the point of I know folks emotionally can say we need to stop growth and that'll solve these problems, but that only pauses until you fix what it is. So like if the county wanted to say we're gonna go from a 100-year storm to requiring developments to prepare for 500-year storms, then they may do a moratorium and then they would develop the rules and regulations to put that in place so that the next person who comes in to apply, that has to meet this higher standard for stormwater. But it wouldn't be retroactive to go back to anybody else in terms of that. It's going forward. And there is a perception, from folks, and I get it. In the middle of a storm, when you have 20+ inches in a matter of a couple of days, that growth is what's causing your stormwater. It's actually caused by areas that were designed or built that didn't require it to be stormwater.
When they widen I-4 and they put 2 extra lanes on each side of the road, the water that runs off of I-4 goes where? It doesn't, some of it come to us.
Well, right, Rick?
A lot of it comes to us.
So my point is that in order to widen the road, what is it, 30 plus 10, 30 feet for the wide for the car? Is it 30 or?
Yeah, our lanes are 10 foot. I don't know what they require.
I mean, on the I-4. Do you want to know what that is? But my point is that in order for them to widen it, they had to encroach on what would have been groundwater runoff, and they put a pavement on it. That water comes to us from somewhere. Do we have any recourse if that water is also affecting what we are now?
That's what we're working on over at Church in Pennsylvania and all that.
Yeah.
That came directly off I-4. The damage it did was from I-4 water, most of it. 90% plus was come off I-4. When FEMA was out there with us last week, we expressed that too, and we've expressed it with our engineers. They're gonna have more of an effect going to DOT and talking to them than we are. Obviously, the ditch down there that they abandoned, said we've got to take care of it. That thing hasn't been taken care of in years. It's all felled trees there. It's not ours, it's theirs. Their water's coming here. That's the conversation, the engineers, and hopefully we do it with the carrot and not the stick, because they got a bigger stick than we do.
Right.
But their water's what caused all that went across Macy, went all the way across Ohio to Macy. That all goes out, but it floods down through there. This side, however, Lake and them are closed, they can't go anywhere. And that side over there where the Webbs and them live, that side meanders out through Betty O's and around there and goes out to Deep Creek. So, that's the problem you have.
Okay.
But DOT definitely is encroaching, because we get the water off of I-4 there, and then we get the water off of Main Street, because it comes down across Main Street once it pops off, and goes down through all these right behind Sherman Williams' house right there too, because years ago the county came with a spider and cleaned some of it, but that was it. But it's really DOT, it's I-4 water. That
Yeah.
does all the damage down there. We've got a lot of damage.
Yeah, that damage on Church Street, over there by Mr. Thayer's house.
Mm-hmm.
That stream is now began to widen going toward the people's house.
Oh, absolutely. That day, when we went out there after the hurricane went out, I've never seen raging rivers, a river, both those pipes as fast as they could. We watched the road, just dropping off right there. Then it goes down there by Goodwin, and it just can't take the water. What we have there in place can't take that kind of water. I was surprised that we didn't lose Goodwin in Pennsylvania again. I really was. We lost it years ago, or after they did it. It just gone during that hurricane.
Well, Goodwin has receded. I mean, not Goodwin. Where the waterway is, it is a open pit. Now, do we have to engineer it to repair it, or can we just dump it?
Again, we're having them talk to DOT and see what part we need. We need help from them. Their water causes, in my opinion, but that's just my opinion.
Mhm. How do we deal with that on a legal perspective?
That area on the east side of Church Street where the stream is washed out at is state land.
State.
Yeah.
So the state has to come in and mitigate the replacement of the shoreline and everything.
The interesting thing about that particular roadway is that on the east side of the road, there's no water running. On the west side of the road, there's water coming out from both of the colonies. Where's that water coming from? In other words, I can see the water running underneath the road and coming from one place, east going to west. But east has no water.
East does have the water. The east side of the road does, coming out of the culverts. That's groundwater. That's most likely groundwater.
So what's coming on the west side is?
There's nothing on the west that I've seen going through there very little. It's on the east side by the apartments.
Yeah.
That's still running today. I think that's groundwater.
That's groundwater coming?
I believe that's partially groundwater.
Because it's a very unique situation to look at, to see a road with an underpass with no water on one side, and where's it coming from on this side?
But we have such a high water table right now, I believe it's coming off of there.
That stream starts at Victoria Gardens, Park, whatever that
Yeah.
housing development is. Goes underneath the road at that street that DOT wants to eliminate. About 50 feet east of that street, it goes underneath the road, goes through the center of the exit ramp area, and there's a concrete flow or concrete culvert on the other side of the ramp that goes through the second part of the triangle. That's what comes underneath the road. And any water flowing through there is what comes underneath and goes across the Church Street. That used to have a constant flow of at least 6 to 12 feet deep of water, or not feet, inches of water flowing through that. Since they built the Victoria Park, that has gone down to half an inch to,
True.
you know, or less, you know. But with the storm, even that ramp area was shut down because it was flooded. There was so much water coming from Victoria Park through there into that area and off of Orange Camp and I-4 that it flooded those ramps. So it was closed for a little while. That also came across through the pipe system, which created an excessive amount of water, which flew over Church Street and washed out that area on the east side of Church Street and came on down to all the other flooding and washing out and stuff like that. But on the other side, when they widened I-4, they put in that giant, what is it, about 3 football fields retention pond at Gasdale Road.
Yeah.
Because their requirement was, the requirement doesn't say put the retention pond where the water's going to come off the highway at.
Just put one in.
It says put in a retention pond that will hold the amount of water that comes off the highway.
Whether it gets there or not.
So whether it gets there or not, it don't matter. So that's why there's that big one, and then they added a couple more up all the way up to 44. And most of those hold water, but they also reduce the amount of water that flows underneath Ohio, which used to be deeper, which also goes down to Lake Macy and joins the other lake that comes across, or the other stream that comes across Church Street. And when the storm hit, all those retention ponds overflowed except for the football field one. And that's what came down, rushing down into causing all the washout areas, and that one yard there by Melissa Park that has that, what, 18 inches of sand that got washed out into their front yard.
And there is a sinkhole on Church Street across the street that became a mini lake for about a minute. And that sinkhole, the owner can't do anything with it because it's always going to fill up with water. And it just so happened at this time that it filled up with enough water. I can only imagine where it would have went if it were something built on it. So we have more than a water problem. I mean, we're called Lake Helen, and I think I'll raise my hand as pleading guilty on this one. When we were first hearing about the storms, the hurricanes, I said, well, I live in Lake Helen. You know, we have plenty of lakes, and we have enough lake to receive this. No one was expecting a 1,000-year storm. You know? But it created a whole different complex of where we are as a city. We are now a lake city that is threatened, literally threatened. And by also by the fact that being a small city, the bigger cities kind of did what they wanted around us and to us. And we didn't have much to say about it. That was the other thing, is that we did not have that with kind of pushback. I remember when they were building the I-4 and they cut down all the trees. And at the time it was Mark Shuttleworth was the mayor, and I went in to speak to him about it, and he says, well, you know, you could probably get more mileage out of it if, as a citizen, you go down, because they're not listening to us. And that's the reality, that they were moving from I-4, coming from Orange City, and they were on the path that they just kept on moving. When they got to Lake Helen, they were trying to finish before the end of the year to get a bonus, and they just clear-cut everything. And that became an issue to bring DOT in, and then they kind of gave us, I think, what did they give us, the trees?
Yeah, they replanted all the intersections and everything. They're along there and did some replanting along near Goodwin and all that, North Goodwin, out that area.
That wasn't even a Band-Aid, it just placated the situation at the time, which now we're all in the middle of. Some of those, a number of those decisions that were made or not made, we're now, at this commission, will be handling it. It's going to be on us to be able to do it, and we can't pass it along to the next commission. I hope that they will see it differently, or hopefully what we can give them is the wisdom of what we found and the problems that we have, and now we're becoming more attuned to them, because for a long time we were not attuned. I can remember as well Victoria Park. There was a woman who lived in Victoria Park, and she came to this commission to explain that Victoria Park was not observing their consumptive use, and they were using more water than they was anticipated or was supposed to, but nobody was checking on it. But it had to be a resident that brought it to our attention that the consumptive use that they were using was taking water from our water table. That's unnecessary history, but it's the reality of what we've been doing. Yes?
On the building moratorium part, we do need to adjust our codes to address our stormwater issues, and it would help with the potential of future developments. For instance, the guy that just did and got the property on just north of John Street, potential of having a housing development going in there, that's going to create tremendous flooding issues unless we change our ordinances and address that. I'm not sure how far into it the Coxon property is, if they're into the process, but it has a potential of slowing down the development on Pervat of the old cattle field there because of the stormwater issues that any development there will create. So a building moratorium for any future projects would be beneficial for us to have time to update our codes to address the stormwater issues in them.
How long do you think it'll take to change the codes and the ordinance?
No, it's at least 6 months,
So,
if not 8.
because of a year or moratorium?
That would probably be the better benefit.
I agree. And we should be thinking about looking on the safe side. I think potentially we know what will happen, and let's just be safe.
Because I know the guy that's developing a property there on East Ohio, or it's 7 houses. When he presented that request to us, and he was very into creating things for stormwater control. That's where you need to get the water absorbing trees put in. And I think he agreed to red oaks or something like that, that absorbs a lot of water.
But who's gonna bring these codes up today, us, or are we gonna get a board together to do that?
It can be us, or we can get a board, citizens group, or whoever together to come up with recommendations.
We have several points, Moratorium planning board, wouldn't hurt to have their review, submit some for suggestion, but ultimately, I think it's up to us to roll up our sleeves and get in there.
Maybe what we're starting place, and I know you and I talked about this, that the East Section Florida Regional Planning Council did some update for you. Now, I don't know what all of that was, but it doesn't appear that it was ever presented back, you know, or what have you. But I mean, there may be some things that will be done that could be incorporated into that, but I don't have to address stormwater at all.
No, from what I read through on that, that was just addressing a lot of administrative corrections on some of the codes and stuff like that to make it more compatible with what the state requirements are. It didn't have anything to do with the issues that we're facing now. There was something else that I wanted to mention. Yeah, some of our stormwater issues dealing with the construction and everything has to do with our, I don't know if you call it complacency or overlooking of the teams that are supposed to do all the approval of the construction sites and everything else. There's requirements from the past of certain swells having to be in front of certain locations, particularly along High Street. If you look at the swell that was installed, it starts from the road level, the grass goes up, forms a mound, goes down, goes low, and comes up and forms to the sidewalk. The water can't get from the street to the swell. It gets from the sidewalk to the swell. But that doesn't help with what's on the street getting into the grass. There's houses that have been built that should have had a slope coming off the house, coming down, and a slope coming back up to the sidewalk that comes from the house straight to the sidewalk. So it holds no retention of rainwater off the structure, which is supposed to be holding 80% of a normal rainstorm. It holds maybe 2% of a normal rainstorm. So the people that do our inspections aren't doing their job correctly. So whoever oversees what they're supposed to be inspecting and everything and approving need to be.
Yeah, we use, I'm not sure what all they inspect, but I know I kind of had to go through some, jumping through some hoops on permits and inspections on things that I've been told I really didn't need a permit on. And then I did need a permit on one. The other one I was told, no, you need a permit. And then at the end of the day, I didn't need a permit on that one, which was the more expensive item that I was putting on the house anyway. So that was fine with me. But what I learned at that time is that we use a contractor out of the land. I don't know the name, but I don't know what all they inspect. I don't know. It's just windows. Is it houses? Is it framing? I don't know who we use.
They're supposed to inspect.
I'm sorry.
Universal engineer.
And so they inspect houses and everything.
It's supposed to be every process
Electrical,
from from start to the finish.
Okay. Well,
Because I know we used to have a guy from Port Orange, and he would come over maybe twice a week. And when I was doing my garage, he said, well, I can't make it over there for you to do your next set and everything. Can you just take a bunch of pictures and everything? So I took pictures of that, right? Of course, he asked me why I was doing it the way I was doing it. And I says, well, I wanted the structural part. His question was because I put the concrete wire in, and I was using fiberglass impregnated wire in the garage. He said, you don't have to do that, it's one or the other. I said, well, I'm doing both because I want it to be stronger. So.
I know the poor guy who came out of my house and he was inspecting everything that was done. He starts like at 7:30 in the morning inspecting, and he has like 26 houses that he's going to inspect, or 26 different locations from Palatka to, I don't know, Orlando. You know, heck of a job. And so he's moving pretty quickly. So I don't know.
But I mean, there's some pros and cons. The cost of having in-house building inspection based on the volume that we've got would cost us more. Because you've got staff, because one inspector has to have a couple of others. And so then when nothing's going on, then you're still paying those people. So there is an advantage to having an outside firm. I don't have issues with that.
I'm not disagreeing with that. No, there's other areas. I think, I'd love to have a government consultant working for the city myself, but, no, I'm not disagreeing with contracting with an inspector at all. It's just, maybe we should have a couple of inspectors and try them out. I mean, you're talking about these issues that just seem.
Well, I haven't had a chance to go through all of our ordinances and everything to see, because he's going to do his inspection based on what our ordinances require. Now, are our ordinances compatible with the state? In some instances, no. And one of them deals with the finished floor level height. The state changed theirs. Our guys in Lake Helen for years have been saying it's 16 inches above the crown of the road. The state years ago changed it to the gutter of the road. 16 inches, that's a couple inches difference. But I believe ours still says the crown of the road, when it should be saying the gutter of the road. So that makes a difference on the finished floor height, which lowers how much fill they need also.
I may be wrong, but I just thought building codes were based off state-wide building codes.
It's
hurricane force, and not necessarily the city and what the city's doing.
The city adopts the state building code,
Okay.
the Florida building code.
Okay.
You're allowed to go stricter, but you can't go lenient.
Okay.
So like if they say it's 16 inches, the finished floor is 16 inches above the gutter of the road, They don't say how high the finished one is. We can put a limit on how high the finished floor can be. So the minimum is 16. The highest it can be, let's say, is 18. So they've got 2 inches of play with for the finished floor. Right now there's no limit on how high the finished floor is, as long as it's a minimum 16 inches off the gutter of the road.
I think you and Bass would have this discussion one night, very.
Yeah. So that's just one of them that I found in there needs to be adjusted.
Those are things that, in our commission meetings, is that, when builders began to build, and we had, what do you call it, not compliances, but we had codes that, on one hand, it was okay, but then when you reread it another way, it was a problem. So, and that was because we did not have our updated versions of it. So you had that clash of, well, you want to do it this way, you want to do it that way, and to make things, I guess, easier, they kind of just got away with doing whatever they want. Now, down the road, this is where we are now. We're down the road. That's what happens when they call it kicking the can down the road. We kick the can down the road for so many things. It's catching up to us.
What cost a lot years ago, and they kicked it down the road to let somebody else handle it, is now we're got that can,
Yeah.
and the amount that it costs us quadrupled, and it's being dumped on the citizens. Do we want to kick it down the road some more to somebody else that could where it costs more? Or should we just go ahead and bite the bullet and handle it? We need to bite the bullet and handle
There
it.
ain't too much more to road you can't get down on that, which that's falling apart.
We got plenty of dirt roads. It doesn't have to be paved.
They're all drainage.
Well, as we are into the moratorium right now, is there any other?
Well, what would we need to do at the commission meeting to enact the moratorium? Just make a motion?
Yeah, Scott will be there, because he asked me to come to this meeting, and I didn't want to spend the money to have him come when we have a meeting on Thursday, and you could give formal direction that you want to do that, and he would draft the ordinance or resolution, and would have to advertise and go through, so I don't know if it's an ordinance, it's 2 readings, so that would be for January, so that would be first read in February, second read in March. If it's a resolution, then it could be March, but Scott will be able to give us the legalese on it or something.
Hopefully nobody comes up with plans between now and then.
Well, the 2 big developments are already in the pipeline, so this is just more impact. Probably single family development, like down the road.
Yeah, but the one on Purvat hasn't been, he's gone through so many suggested ways, he hasn't submitted a finalized one on what he wants to do.
No, he's still in the pipeline. Now, Scott may be able to tell at one point, can it impact somebody in terms of there. So, I mean, that may be the fact, because he did pause it, especially with, the flooding of the Lake Harlan area. Now, whether pausing it means he pulls himself out of the line, that's the question.
Are you talking about Costa?
Yeah. But yeah, Scott would roll it, I think, give us better direction on that.
And any update on Enchantment? I think it's Enchantment. The house at the end on the,
So reached out to the county, the lady who handles that is on vacation this week, but she sent me some information that I was able to send to the resident. I mean, today was the deadline for them to release file in FEMA. And then when she gets back, which will be next week, she'll follow up with me, but it's about a 2-year process.
yeah, I know it's going to take some time to go through.
And in that, there's still 75% either the city or some other entity, but there's still 25 that comes out of the homeowner. So, I mean, if the expectation is that someone's getting their property bought out by FEMA, and they're getting a check in 6 months for full value. It's not the way that it works.
No, not anymore. I mean, it used to be, because there's been a couple towns that FEMA come in and says, we're moving your town, move out. And they the government footed the whole bill to move the town.
Yeah, they qualify under the fact that that particular house you're talking about, 2 flooding instances within an 8-year period, they had 2 within 2 years. So at least on that aspect, but there's, anytime you deal with the federal government, it's not easy. But even talking with the county, and she said, with everybody cooperating, where they're still looking at the 2+ year cycle, because they didn't put funding in yet for the Milton, so, people are still dealing with buyouts from Ian. And so it's that cycle going through, but I'll have more information on that next week.
Speaking
And
of.
one of those towns I was talking about happening, it's up in Arkansas, I'm having to go out there with my friend to go fishing on Main Street. About 10 feet deep of water, and you see the foundations of the old stores and everything's still there. So, it's interesting, fishing in a flood city.
Speaking of FEMA, rumor has it FEMA was touring the city yesterday. I think it was yesterday or day before. Touring the city.
I thought it was last week that they came through, but.
Yeah, they came through and met with
Last
Rick
Friday.
and I and
Friday.
her and the engineers, and we went all the road damage.
Only the roads that were not underwater. The
Which
roads that
was-
are underwater are a separate, what they call work order, but they came out and looked at the stuff that didn't have like North Highway took them there, but that is they ruled that out. We have nothing they can do there for us there. You can't do future damage or anything. You can't tell them maybe the road's gonna collapse. That's a no, they said no. But they did East Ohio, we did Church Street, Pennsylvania, Mackenzie, those areas there. Now we had on what they call one work order, that they can come out and look at and begin the process of any mitigation or anything like that. It's just the very beginning. They have to come out and do a site inspection, and then we work from there with them.
Yeah.
Is that what they have your?
Yeah, that's what we were doing, yeah.
What can you do there?
Well,
Paid for the plates,
Oh, okay.
any mitigation that we could do to repair the road, like they did on East Ohio, when we repaired that one spot there from Ian, that kind of stuff there.
Okay.
It's better to ask, and if they say, like I said, we took them to High Street, and he said, sorry, there's nothing, you go, okay, well, we put it on there, we'll take it, that it, but better to ask. Whatever we get's better than nothing.
That's true.
citizens, or anything that we open to the public? Is there anything you'd like to bring to us attention? Yes, Nancy?
I would like to express that when we get into the ordinances and possibly the comp plan and updating them to look at our conservation lands, which we have ignored, and to go full circle to your discussion about flooding and areas off of I-4 and yada yada, those are all wetlands, and they are nationally recognized wetlands that should not be built upon. And when we move forward with some of these big projects that are already in the pipeline, that needs to be thought out for the people that are living here, existing here, so that we're not flooded. That's it.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Thank you. I would support the moratorium. I think we need building here. That could probably give me a shot from some people because we need the assistance with tax. So I'm in no way totally against development in this community. But I do think there's smarter development given what we have with our groundwater issue. So I would support the moratorium and with the intent to really evaluate that stormwater, that being a close basin, you gotta build it 100-year flood line, but moving that forward. That doesn't, you can't build you couldn't put a 500-year standard in there. You would never build another thing in this community. It would only have to go from 100 to 125, 150, some type of standard like that. It's kind of a gray area once you get past the 100-year flood line, but that would make a huge difference. But places like the woods didn't flood, not because they're so well built, but because they sent water downhill to Macy. If you go to those retention ponds, you can see these pop-off pipes I keep talking about for Lake Harlan. They're in those retention ponds, and you can see all of the moss, the grasses, everything that when the ponds filled up, the water took it to the drain, and basically still today, sitting right on top of the drain, where that community was sending its water to wherever those just pull the development plans, but wherever those outfall to, everybody downhill took water from that development. When Pravat gets built to whatever standard that they're gonna build it to, or whatever moratorium, that, whatever retention ponds they put likely between Harlan and the community, they're gonna have outfall pipes that are gonna dump right into Harlan. All that water is gonna get into Harlan anyway. So, the same issue still exists. You gotta poke a hole in the bathtub that is Harlan, which I recognize as a closed basin, the challenge that is. But if you at least had a 150-year retention pond, then say a development on Pravat, those ponds would be bigger. They'd be like giant, shallow swimming pools because the water table is too high. So it would absorb a lot more green space, and it would hold the water up above the Harlan. But over time, like where we exist now, what's going to happen is percolation is going to settle, and water is going to make its way into Harlan regardless if it gets through the outfall pipe or it drains through the natural sand that's now below that retention pond in Harlan, back over Michigan, because you haven't popped a hole in the bathtub to let it get downhill and get out. So some of these things are really good because they're going to help over the long run if we can get some of these stormwater improvements. Lacking an engineering degree here, but having some pretty good sense about this development stuff, until you pop a hole in that closed basin, it's not going to fix it. And that is not because it's always been wrong, but it's because the amount of water in the aquifer and the water table that we now have, that's our reality. So sorry for going so long-winded, but
great.
I would support all that. Thank you.
That's part of one of the reasons I want to discuss vegetative control methods so that we don't have all of the water continuing to percolate through the ground and into the closed basins. It would be held with vegetative material in either plants or trees. They can hold a ton of water. And I mean, I know it's expensive, but it might help us since we are closed basin. So one of the things I've been doing a lot of research on and excited to share as well as we get into this.
Look forward to it. Thank you for that input. With that being said,
Speaking on that, that's something we can take a look at. And I don't know if Burton is here. With our current retention ponds, like the one up there on Summit and Craig. Cloud. Summit and Cloud. To plant some of these water absorbing plants around the sidewall of that retention pond to help absorb some of the water, stormwater that goes into that pond. That's something the city can look at doing now to help alleviate some of the problem with the water. And I know it's in a high area, but during the storm it did get a lot of water into it, but it's also, I think it's dry now because it percolates down into the ground pretty good.
that is first time I've ever heard that in terms of vegetative control. Makes a lot of sense. Nothing that ever crossed the desk, but thank you for being at least.
Gotta be creative, right?
Gotta be creative.
We know a lot more now than we did before the storms, and it's something I was looking at prior to the storms, but now I've been even more curious and
Push to the forefront.
right. And on that note of trees, we have Arbor Day coming up, so I just wanted to let you all know that we have graciously gotten some donors who are purchasing larger trees, 100-gallon trees that we planted in our public spaces as part of our everyday tree giveaway. So it's very exciting. The program's a little bit expanding and at no cost to the citizens. So that's, maybe that's something that we can look at next year too, is to continue to grow that program and start planting even more especially at Willow Park, where we're seeing Wilson Park and, Blake, or the three parks.
Thank you for your leadership on that. We go to the commissions. Someone? That's your piece.
Yeah, come out and see us January 18th, 8 a.m.
So too.
Looking forward to Thursday's meeting.
So 3. So far. Good night, everyone. Thank you, brother.
Good, yeah. I almost work, got a little, we need to get later, so I was gonna go out there and.